Howdy again, Mr. Pete here. Welcome back to the shop. And this is tips number 1083, and it's part 2 of a two-part video. And I would refer you back to tips number 1082 part 1 so that you know what I'm talking about. And these two videos are all about the machinability of steel and various other metals. Now, in part 1, it was one of my experiments, and you can see the remnants of it here, where I power drilled several different samples of steel and determined the amount of torque involved, and in some ways that showed you how machinable it was, so you might enjoy that. But the purpose of this part 2 is to talk a little bit more about what machinability is, and then I'm going to show you, as promised, the entire setup and what I had to do to perform this experiment. There was quite a bit of background information and fiddling around to do this, so you might enjoy that. So let's get started. If you have not already seen it, this is part 1, tips number 1082. Look it up. If you are new to machine shop work, you may not be aware that some metals, some steels, are much easier to machine than others. And this is called machinability. And machinability is the ease with which a material can be cut, shaped, or formed using machine tools. Now, this is the AI overview, so Google this if you want to know a little bit more about it. Let me show you the Wikipedia definition, which is very similar. And thanks to Wikipedia for their definition of machinability. So if you're interested in this, look at this up on Wikipedia, and the article is much longer than what I am showing you here on the screen. Some of this is a repeat from the previous video, but here are the machinability results from tips 1082. Look through that, and I'll put a still picture at the end. But what is the basis for machinability? And that's what I'll cover now real briefly. And I'm going to bring out both the Ryerson and the Central Steel stock lists from my library to show you how they base this. When I was teaching, I ordered most of my steel from Ryerson, but some from Central and other suppliers as well. And these books are about a half-inch thick, so they're just about every kind of steel and aluminum and other material you can imagine. And near the end, there are charts and specifications that you might find interesting. And I'm going to open both books here to the pages where they cover machinability. Do remember the number of steel 1112 because it had a machinability of 100. So other materials are based on that, either above or below 100. So I'll zoom in now. You don't need to see both of these pages, but as you can see here, various alloys, the specifications are here as to their composition and so on, but this column right here is the machinability, and it's pretty much the same as in the Ryerson catalog. Okay, these are the average properties of standard steels, and they're talking about tensile strength and yield and other things you don't really need to know about, but this is the interesting column here on machinability. So if we look here at a common steel that you are very used to, and 1018, I've got to use my optivisor here. Where is 1018? Right here, both hot rolled and cold rolled, and you can see that they have machinability of 55 and 63, and they can be compared to, so they're not as machinable as the 1212, which you see right here, and that is 100% machinability. So you can see that both the hot and cold rolled 1018, the real common ones, are harder to machine, harder to drill, harder to turn, harder to tap. And that's what I attempted to show you in the previous video. And again, these miracle steels, and I put a little check mark here by 12L14 because that was one of my favorites, and it has a machinability of 185, so it machines almost twice as good as 1018. And then there are two others here. I'm not really familiar with them, but notice that one of them is 230 machinability and one 295. So that third one that I showed you here machines 3 times easier than the one up here in the corner on the pink, and almost 4 times easier than 1018. So get yourself some. You will be amazed by it. Now this is the page out of that red Ryerson book, and I think it's a little easier to read. And the very last column you see right here is machinability, but again there's your 1018 hot and cold rolled, and look at how poorly they machine compared to some of the other ones you see here. And my favorite at the high school was Ledloy 300. That's usually what I ordered, and it had a machinability of 180. Now these materials cost a little bit more. 12L14 is something you can probably get even on the internet. Remember that these leaded alloys cannot be welded, and the lead in them is what makes them so very, very easy to machine. And these are the steels that are used on, well, years ago on automatic screw machines and so on at high speed, and they just they were a miracle because the tools lasted longer, they could hold the tolerances, and there's just a plethora of reasons why you would want free machining materials in your shop. Now I found this on the internet, and this is the AI version, and it's much longer than what you can see on your screen, so feel free to look this up. But if you remember just moments ago where I talked about CD 1112 steel, and there are different names for that. There's the SAE number, but it's a free cutting carbon steel known for its excellent machinability, often used as the 100% benchmark for machining ratings, and is characterized by high sulfur for improved chip formation. So read through that if you desired on your own phone. Please leave a comment if you find this type of content interesting. I know it's a little bit academic and maybe too educational for guys that want to actually make chips, but if you're having trouble getting a good surface finish because possibly you do not have the ability to sharpen tools just right, these steels are very forgiving. And if you're doing tapping and threading with a die, you'll find it so much easier. Alright, now that I've covered that portion of the video about machinability, I want to show you the setup that I used in order to perform this experiment, which was in the previous video. In the recent past, I produced a video, and this is tips number 1043, also where I was power drilling, but this experiment was performed on the 12-inch Atlas Craftsman lathe. And you notice that my setup here is extremely unwieldy and long, and my whole idea here was to make it more compact and less wobbly, more rigid, and so on and so forth. So check out the improvement that I made, and this video is being performed on the Clausing 12-inch lathe. Okay, here we are on the Clausing, and this whole setup is approximately 8 inches long. It was 14 inches long on the other machine, but notice the setup here. I'm using a Loris tool post and a special fixture here I made to fit into the tool holder that would hold the QUINN torque meter, and then an adapter and a drill, and then the actual sample workpiece in the chuck, and I was power feeding during the experiment. For maximum rigidity in this setup, I turned the compound to 90 degrees so that the tool post cannot get pushed back this way. And I squared up this face with the faceplate, so this is at this is perfectly parallel, or should I say at 90 degrees to the axis of the machine, and all of the drilling was done at 1000 RPM, which comes to 85 feet per minute with a 5/16 drill, and the feed rate was 6 thousandths per revolution. So I initially machined this piece, and this is 3/8 square, and the purpose of this was to adapt the torque meter into the tool holder here. But when I did that, I didn't think ahead, and you notice that the display would not be visible for you, the viewer. So I wanted it to be 45 degrees from that, so naturally I had to do it over and did not use this, and I went to the milling machine and made another one. I made it a little bit smaller, it didn't need to be this long, and notice that this one is at 45 degrees so that during filming the readout is at a very nice angle for you to view. Now, I did not want to use a drill chuck because it makes the thing too long, plus there had to be a way to adapt the chuck to the 3/8 square drive right here. So I decided to use a 5/16 drill, and this was a brand new drill when I started, and it is a split point. If you can see that, maybe not. But it is 118 degrees. It's not one of the 135 degrees. But I needed to hold it into this little 5/16 socket. So I machined the end into a hex. And I did that by holding it in the Bridgeport in the hex collet holder like this. And I was very easily able to machine that, and now it fits quite nicely into a socket, but it will get pulled out of the socket, so I decided not to use this particular socket. So instead I selected one of the sockets in my hex set here, 3/8 drive, and here it is. I already removed and lost the Allen wrench, but you know, it has a set screw. So I'm able to put the drill into the socket and tighten the set screw, and I probably made this a little bit too long. This is not a deep socket, and there was still a little bit of wobble even after I tightened it up. And yes, I would have been better off with a shorter drill, but in some cases I just have to use what I have on hand, and then this of course went right into the, boy, that's a tight fit, into the torque meter here, but there's still a certain amount of slop here that I do not like at all. But all of my pieces were pre-center drilled so that they could find the true center. But in some cases here, I probably shouldn't show you this, but in this particular fitting right here, I did use some brass shims to kind of take out some of that play. So you got play here, I've got play here, and I've got play here, so they kind of compound one another, but it worked out just fine. So make sure you watch that video if you have not already. And in a previous video I had made this Morse taper adapter, and it also held the torque meter, and that was for one of my other videos. There's a whole series of these experimental videos. I'll put a playlist at the end. And I'm sure some of you are thinking, well, how did you locate the entire kit and caboodle here so this was truly on center both in this axis and up and down? Well, while I was making this, I very carefully located and then center punched the end of this. So can you see that? And then I installed a wiggler in the 3-jaw chuck, as you can see, and I proceeded to move up and down with the Aloris by loosening the dovetails, and in and out right here with the cross slide until I located it visually as perfect as I could, and it did turn out quite good. And one more thing to show you how I proofed it. So to proof it, this is a 5/16 hardened drill bushing, and I put that into the chuck, just snugged it up a little bit, and advanced the carriage to make sure that the drill would fit in there correctly, and it does. So that is the sum total, I believe, of my setup. I think I covered the whole thing. Well, why did you show us all that, Mr. Pete? It was kind of boring. Well, the reason I did is sometimes this is really behind the scenes, things that I have to do to set up for a video. Very time consuming, but enjoyable. And you can possibly use some of these different steps and operations that I showed you here in your own projects in your home shop, because there are just endless possibilities in the machine shop. It is all up to you and your creativity and experience over many years, so that you can do something like this to make a project or a design or one of your inventions. Hope you liked the video, and I'll see you next time. So long for now.